Howdy, y'all. I just slithered over from Jimmy's channel onto this one, and I'm here to tell you, this time for the Sunday show after dark. It's the Sunday show that occurs after dark. I'm your host, Forrest, Valkai, and I'm joined today by Paul. How are you today, dude?
I am doing all right. How about, and you've had a busy afternoon. I was watching you on another channel. It was very exciting.
I'm very tired. I'm very, very tired, but I'm happy to be here. We got a great show for everybody today. For folks who believe in Jesus or in the Bible or in God or gods or angels or demons or whatever other thing, this is your chance to pick up that phone and talk to two atheists, two people who do not believe like you. The number on the bottom of the screen, 720-619-2288, or if you're outside of the United States, you can call us on the web link in the description. If you're inside the U.S., we do appreciate using that phone number. It's toll free or whatever the line is today. So please pick up that phone. We already have people on the line waiting to get in. But in the meantime, Paul, who are you hoping to talk to today? What kind of calls are you hoping to take?
Well, let me say, connected to that, I just a couple hours ago got my mug brawl,
Hell
which
yeah.
is my For the Bible Tells Me So mug. So actually, I'm torn. I like to be able to hold up the mug when someone is being fallacious and making an argument that is only for the Bible tells me. So I enjoy, lifting that up for the audience who winks and nods along. But also, I'm kind of tired of that kind of call. So maybe if you do call, don't make me hold up my mug. You will have failed in your argument for the New Testament or the Bible, however it would be, if I hold up my mug. So that'll be the test. But actually, since I'm with you, I would also love to have some calls about evolution. I recently saw there was a lively debate about whether endogenous retroviruses are indeed proof of common ancestry on a given channel. I would love for calls like that to happen. I was enjoying your feud with Ray Comfort. That was fun.
I love that. We've.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, all I was going to say was I was unaware that he was directly. I have covered Ray in the past and have noted his less than honest editing techniques in the past, shall we say? And I was saddened to learn that has continued and or escalated.
Yep. Yeah. That's I haven't heard of the dude in years. Like it was, I was even getting comments and I was agreeing with them. Like, we're dunking on Ray Comfort. Was it fucking 2009? What's going on? You know what I mean? Like, it's good.
Exactly.
But like, that was, I haven't heard of the dude in years. I haven't thought of the dude in years. And then last year he put out a video and I was laughing. I was so excited. I was like, this is how crazy, this is a YouTube atheist milestone, whatever. And I looked and it was literally just the exact same thing as always. It was the same thing as every other video he's ever made, and that disappointed me, but it was too funny not to make a video about.
So hopefully if everyone calls in, you will be better than Ray, and that you'll be more poignant than funny. We don't want funny calls.
It's not hard to do, and like that's the thing. It's like I would love to take calls about that whole thing. That'd be a lot of fun for me. I'd be very interested in that, but also just like. I've got people, I know there's at least one person on my Instagram who claims that I lie about the Bible that promised to call in. I'd love to take Bible calls.
That would be great.
I would love to take calls about Jesus today. And I would always love to do an evolution call or a biology call. Like we literally, where I was on Jimmy's channel, the call that I just left was somebody saying that homosexuality is unnatural and isn't supposed to happen in biology. I'm like, bruh, let's talk about it. the amount of fucking transphobes that still think that I'm on their side because biology is a thing that they stopped studying in 6th grade and they think everybody else did too. I would love to talk to you. If you have a question about LGBT people in biology, this would be a really fun show. Or evolution in general. You just want to talk about where we came from, where different things came from. I had one dude on that Ray Comfort video tell me that I was a liar and a religious blah, blah, blah about evolution because, and I swear to Glob, I'm not making this up, how did the first birds breathe if they hadn't evolved lungs yet? And I'm like, please call in. Please call in. I would love that so much. And I've got another dude who's doing his next. It's Mike, this troll that I've had following me on and everything. I think he's a troll. I don't know. He might actually just be this resistant to education. Who is his first script was that evolution's impossible because you would have had to have evolved a male and then a female in the same lifetime.
I've heard that.
Yep. And then that evolution is impossible because when a sperm and an egg fuse, we see a person developing, so we don't need evolution to develop because we know how that happens as babies. And that's wild. And now he's got a new one. I don't remember what it is, but like those are some ones that I think would be just fun tonight. I want to have a fun show. You know, that's Absolutely. My whole thing.
Piling onto that, the next video I'm working on, they're talking about why we don't see half evolved things. That's their big argument. Nothing's half evolved out there, so can't be true. Yeah.
It's oof. With that, we've already got lines open 720-619-2288. We've got a lot of atheists calling in, and one theist who we've talked to a couple of times before, and so we'll see if we have anything more interesting to say today, anything that needs to be expounded upon. So there's lines, y'all. If you're excited, if you're interested, we'll talk to you. Paul, what do you want to start with?
Well, have we talked to the deist before?
I don't think so, and I don't know how much I would have to offer to this, but it's a conversation to have. So let's start there. Olivia, pronoun she, her, calling in from Articulate Zebras, who once talked about the ethics of curing neurodivergence. Olivia, you are on the line with Forrest and Paul. How are you today?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Hell yeah.
Welcome. So what are you thinking, and how might this relate to a show about kind of ostensibly about supernatural beliefs or that kind of thing?
Yeah, well, okay. So the reason I wanted to call in to ask about it was because we're in a really interesting situation in science right now where, like, in particular, ever since COVID happened and there's been all kinds of advancements in like CRISPR technology. This is kind of more of a thing I imagine you would know a bit about, Forrest. But like, we're at a really interesting situation where even though a lot of things are wrong in the world right now, medically speaking, there's crazy advancements like on the horizon. Like, it's totally reasonable to think that we might have a proper cure for cancer in like all aspects within our lifetime. So
maybe
that kind of leads me to think there was a call that you had probably about a month ago for us that really caught my attention. It was a gentleman who called in who was talking about how he's basically how he's pro-choice. And he was a disabled gentleman who said that I don't want to misquote him, but from what I remember, he basically said that he feels that his mother should have had the option of aborting him had she known that he was going to be born with a disability that he had.
Okay.
And that was just a really interesting thought to consider because, like, I mean, I'm pro-choice, but to hear that from a person who is actually fully grown and has experienced a life that was severely impacted by a disability like that, to say it would have been better if they just didn't exist, that was really shocking to me, I guess, to hear. And so myself speaking, I'm also disabled to a lesser extent. I have ADHD, And it just made me get to thinking, like, with the way technology is going, there may come a time where we are able to cure ADHD, for example, or like, this is like a whole other can of worms, but like someone might start saying they want to try and quote unquote cure autism or something. But like, I feel like it's the kind of thing where we really need to be having a discussion about, because of how these types of issues could come up very soon in the future.
Yeah.
I guess
sorry,
my question is, like,
second.
where's the line for what should be tackled from a like a medical advancement point of view versus like the ethics of? Sorry, I'm a little frazzled on this. I guess my question.
You're talking about a few things there. Like, so there's a difference between, of course, at one point I thought you were talking about designer babies. You know, that's one level of thing. Like the CRISPR involvement is obviously CRISPR can't do anything for a grown human because you'd have to edit every single cell. You know, so there's designer baby aspects of it, and once you start editing for, if we can verifiably and on a reproducible basis say that this gene, editing this gene in this way prevents this disease or whatever, that's one thing. Obviously, there'll be slippery slope, as I want my kid to be 6'8" instead or whatever. Like it's going to be tough to stop. Versus what you seem to also be saying, well, should we try and cure neurodivergence? But you sounded like maybe this was like for treatment in people who are already adults and that kind of thing. Is there a specific angle of this that you think is the most problematic, and or that you think is most likely or should be solved?
Yeah, sorry. You're right. There's a lot of things all at once. If I was to succinctly list it, I guess my question would be, what is the line for when it starts becoming, when it becomes eugenics, basically? Because like
I'm trying to find
I'm not
the
trying
show.
to say like there's. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, I apologize. I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm trying to find the show at this moment, where Erica and I believe it was in the last Skeptalk we did 12 days ago. We actually tackled exactly this for a long time. And so I can give you a brief summary. Yeah, here we go. There was a couple calls actually where we talked about that. One call from somebody named Sick Duck wanted to talk about the potential for elimination of genetic diseases and discussions of practical eugenics. And then there was one from somebody named Evan who said that eugenics isn't evil, but just a tool from a transhumanist perspective. And we discussed those things. And so I would encourage you to go check that out if you want to hear a lot about like what Erica and I have to say. But just the cliff notes of the whole thing is to say that when you are saying, like Paul was suggesting, I want to tweak the genes to make sure that my baby is this tall and has this color eyes and is this good at music and sports and whatever like that, then you have this major moral area where you're like, okay, why the hell would you want to do that? If, however, you want to tweak genes to say my baby is never going to have Huntington's disease, is not going to be susceptible to these types of cancers, is not going to be to have asthma or whatever other kind of some sort of autoimmune issue or whatever, then the question isn't why would you do that, it's why would you not do that, right? And so the question is less one of possibility and pragmatism and more of where are we drawing the lines on who is being treated and cured, quote, quote, before they're even born, and where do we put that person's autonomy in deciding that they want to participate in that? So something like CRISPR, yeah, there's advances in gene therapy technologies that are allowing us to do shit like that could actually, even in an adult, potentially fix their whole body and eliminate or whatever. But the key is they get to make that decision for themselves. And especially if we're talking about neurodivergence here, there are people like Jimmy Snow, who says if he could take a pill and not be autistic anymore, he would do it in a heartbeat. And then there are whole fucking autism advocacy organizations that say we are not diseased. We do not want to be treated. We just want to be people. And so the question is not, can we or even should we? It's, where do people have the right to make that decision about themselves? And so if you want to see us talk about that in more detail, I recommend you check that call out. But there's not a lot more that we could possibly say at this moment. And also, I'm not the guy to ask, because I would have, ultimately, this is not my area of expertise, and it would be a limited opinion when there are actual medical ethicists out there that are digging into this way more seriously than I ever could in my field. Does that make sense?
Okay, I understand. What show did you say that was that you would recommend me checking out?
It was the Skeptalk with me and Erica. If you go to the Line channel and hit the live tab, it's 4 rows down on the far right. It was 12 days ago. Evolution is a fact, disagree. Call Forrest, Valkai, and Erica GG. And that's the show where there's 2 calls. And if you look up Faye Halo, shout out to them, who does our timestamps all the fucking time. They link on there. You can find those calls really quick.
And as the movie industry guy, I would just recommend you watch Gattaca.
Gattaca. I don't know what that is, but
it has a lot.
Oh, Ethan Hawke, Uma Thurman movie. It's amazing. It's about this very thing. It's an amazing movie.
Yeah. Right on.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I'll give that a look, and I appreciate you giving me your thoughts.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Great start to the show. Very pleasant. Thank you very much, Olivia. We've got a couple of the folks here. We're going to go with the theist call first. It's Nyx, pronouns she and her, who wants to talk about her pagan beliefs. Nyx, you're on the line with Forrest and Paul. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm looking up Gattaca is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Oh, you need to see it. Yeah.
Oh, I love that movie. When I was in AP Bio in high school, my teacher had a whole unit when we were into like genetics and epigenetics, talking doing that unit. We dedicated like an entire school week to watching that movie.
Yep. Must see.
It sounds.
Anyway,
I'm guessing that's the point of the title. I didn't know. I just saw it written out, and it's a DNA sequence, right? So like
it's a DNA. Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. Cool. I'll check it out. Nyx, what do you want to talk about?
Yeah, I would just kind of like to have a discussion about like my pagan beliefs, what I believe, why I believe it, that sort of thing.
Sweet.
Go for it.
What do you want to? You start. You tell us what god or gods you believe in and why, or what other supernatural things we should talk about. You lead the conversation,
and specifically why we should also believe.
Well, I think that like people should be like, if you're going to be religious, be like more into paganism, that sort of thing, just because I think it's more compatible with living a like good life, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, that sort of thing. I think it's more conducive for that as opposed to Christianity, because Christianity has, and other Abrahamic faiths have so many like bullshit restrictions on life.
Sure, but I don't super care whether a religion is. I don't specifically care about the utility of religion. Like when people call asking, trying to pitch that one religion is more has better utility than another, I tend not to care until I'm convinced that they're true, because the true one ultimately would be have the most utility. So,
okay, cool. Yeah, so I'm a Norse pagan specific. I mean, there's all sorts of gods in Norse paganism. What I am what I particularly, like the gods that I worship and actually like give offerings to and like practice with are Hel and Freya. As a trans person, Hel like really appealed to me, just in like I was already Norse pagan, but like in terms of like actually doing the practice, Hel appealed a lot to me just because she is like the goddess of death and like represents death and rebirth and new life and the cyclical nature of existence and that sort of thing. And then Freya is more of just like feminine nature, magic, sort of like feminine empowerment, that sort of thing. So that's kind of what drew me to those gods specifically in the faith. but then what drew me to the faith originally was that it's the ancestral practice of Germanic peoples, and I myself am Germanic. That is like both sides of my family have ties to like Germanic ethnicity. Less so my dad's side because he's more like Norman invasion of England, that sort of tie to it. Like it's complicated on my dad's side; they're messy. My mom's side is a lot more straightforward. Uh, but yeah, that's like just it being
Okay.
an ancestral.
So I too am Germanic, but that doesn't necessarily. I'm not hearing anything in there why that should. Do you think that these are that those are characters that you're drawn to, or do you think that those are real entities that are being described in the legends, in the stories, in the whatever's been passed down?
I think that it is like if I had to put a label on it, it is the worship of the personification of what these entities represent. So it's like in part, yes, I think that they are like actual beings that exist, but it is also what they represent that is being worshipped more so than anything else.
What makes you think that they exist beyond being abstract avatars of properties, I guess?
I mean, it's mostly just like personal experiences and like different spiritual experiences that I've had in my life, but it's also, partly the belief that, what humans believe in and like is, I hate to say the word manifested because I hate that word and the way that it's used today by, the TikTok witches, that sort of thing. But yeah, I guess kind of that sort of belief that what people like the collective belief of humanity is like in itself creating these things and these beings, but also that like humans having consciousness and bringing consciousness into the world is what gives these beings like actual personality and consciousness. And
So
that
that's a lot
before humanity.
That's a lot of things there. Do you?
Yes.
The first one you listed was it Hell or Hella? Which god was the first one you listed?
Yeah.
Hell. Okay. HEL, I think. Right. Right. Anyway.
HEL. Yeah.
So yeah. So you said that consciousness created hell.
So what I mean, it'd take me like a little while to, and this is very off the cuff, but it requires a lot of explaining. So
okay,
I think that these like concepts and these beings existed before humanity did, but that they're more primordial, more animalistic, and more chaotic before
but why
humanity.
Why do you think that they pre-existed?
Well, because the concepts like that they represent existed before like humanity was as conscious and evolved as we are now. Like death and rebirth and these sort of things existed before.
So the concept of death definitely predates humans.
Mm-hmm.
But you're saying why must all concepts relate to a deity? Like there was the concept of heat, obviously very early in the universe. There was the concept of light very early in the universe. There was a concept of distance. Like there's any number of concepts. Suddenly, as soon as there were photons, you could count them, and so the concept of numbers existed, or math. Like, does every concept or every property that I can imagine have an analog deity for some reason? Like, why should I think that?
Yeah, I would say that, the vast majority, like light and, like these sort of more primordial concepts that have to do with the cosmos itself, they do have personifications and deities associated with them. In Norse
Why not go more
paganism,
fundamental?
Sorry?
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm curious.
Go, please.
No, it's just building off because Paul, you said that like, does every concept have a deity? And Nick's what she said to counter that was to say, well, it's these fundamental things, and the example she gave was light. And I'm curious, like, why not electromagnetism, of which light is one expression of that force? Why doesn't gravity have a god? Why doesn't the strong nuclear force have a god? Why, when we talk about these so-called primordial things, are you still picking relatively arbitrary human things that are noticeable and important to early humans? Things like, we're talking about fire and war and agriculture and shit like that. Those are the gods we did. We don't get a god of carbon, right? And I'm wondering why those lines are where they are, and if that causes you to question or pause why the lines are important in the first place.
Well, I partially disagree with that. So, these more like fundamental aspects of the universe, like the strong, weak nuclear force, electromagnetism, those sort of things. There is, in my interpretation, there is like the founding like deity in this faith, Ymir, is the universe itself. Like Ymir's body and essence is what the cosmos is as we understand it. So in my interpretation of my own faith, Ymir is like the personification of the more like basal, fundamental like concepts and elements of the universe.
Do these abstractions do anything? Is it consequent? Do they care if we worship them? Can the god of war assist me in war? Can the god of health assist me with my health? What's the nature of the interaction here?
Yeah, so it is in a lot of more pagan beliefs. I'm most familiar with Norse paganism and Hellenistic pagan faith. I'm not super familiar with other ones, but I know from my own practice and like the practices of the people that I know that it is like you are trying to like giving offerings and worship to please the gods in the hope that they will like give you favor and like aid you in your life.
Cool. So what's the evidence that anyone has been able to please one of them to the extent where they were helped in some way?
I can give an example from my own personal life. So there was one time when I was walking home, and like I have a raven skull. Sorry, a raven skull like on my keychain, and that is like one of the things that is associated with hell and like more death aspects, because ravens are scavengers and like are kind of seen as omens of death and that
Very
sort of
smart.
thing. So yes, so one day I'm like walking home and I check my purse and I realize, oh shit, my keys aren't in my purse at all. Like I check every pocket, I check the like pockets in the pants that I'm wearing. There's nowhere to be found, and so I'm like backtracking and like looking for these keys, like just on the sidewalk and in the road. And when I'm like in the middle of an intersection, I hear like the jingling of the keys like on the ground, and like I looked in that like crosswalk and they weren't there. And this is a bright pink 3D printed skull, so it's very visible on black asphalt, and it wasn't there. And then I turn around and there they are, and I like attribute that to like hell just kind of looking out for me a little bit, because I give offerings and I do my best to.
So Nix, I have very similar stories that I could tell about how Jesus helped me find contact lenses, how Jesus helped me find my keys, and how Jesus helped me find my wallet when I was a Christian. Jesus helped me do all of those things. Does that in your mind, if I told those anecdotes with similar, details as to why it was unlikely I was going to find them on my own, would those stories convert you to Christianity?
In my religious belief, I don't think that it would be like Jesus that is helping you, because I don't think that Jesus was,
but that's who I was praying to.
Magical,
no, but that's who, but that's who I was praying to. I was praying to Jesus.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, in my specific interpretation of paganism, and I have noticed that this is shared at least to an extent among other Norse pagans, is that when you are giving worship and reverence to the specific concepts that a deity represents, they also see that as favor, and as they accept it as worship, even if it's not necessarily to the named deity itself.
But do you think
of the things that Jesus
Nix, do you think that any of that is evidence that other people should consider evidence of that hell is a real entity that helped you? I'm not an evangelist, so I think that what convinces one person isn't necessarily going to convince someone else. It is evidence that has convinced me, and I think that for some people require more, just more in order to be. Do you think I should still be a Christian because Jesus helped me find all the things that he helped me find when I was a Christian? Should I not have left? I don't think that Christianity is so much a valid religion just because it is inherently contradictory. And I don't think that Jesus was. But Jesus helped me. Being. But Jesus helped me find stuff. Jesus absolutely helped me find stuff that I was convinced I was never going to find. Mm-hmm. Well, and that's the first story you pulled out
in the religion that I have.
Christianity isn't contradictory. Well, no, Christianity is contradictory, but that's just because people have corrupted the Bible, and it's not about the religion; it's about the relationship with Jesus Christ, and that's why we should be Christians.
I guess, Nick,
everything about the Bible is contradictory, but I'm just
looking
for. What I'm trying to explain is that.
Do you think that it's possible that the reason why paganism is less contradictory is because it doesn't make the same kind of firm claims? And is therefore has fewer points of falsifiability?
Not necessarily. I think that paganism is less contradictory because it doesn't have it doesn't hold itself to this concept of one omniscient, all-powerful God that is very much a unique thing to the Abrahamic faith, and I think that it exists purely as a way to justify the horrid things that they were doing in the past. And with paganism, it is much more about being in tune with nature and things that are actually there, and bettering your own.
So pagan religions of the past. So pagan religions of the past that would have involved child sacrifice and that kind of thing. Those were not true paganism.
I'm not certain that Norse paganism had did child sacrifice. I'm not 100% sure if that's something that we know.
Other pagans did.
Sorry?
I said other pagans did, and I guess I'm just kind of hung up on this thing that it sounds to me at this moment, Nix, that your argument is, yeah, but I'm right. Well,
I mean, I think the Norse paganism is the correct religion, obviously, because it's the one that I follow.
What's a falsifiable claim that Norse paganism makes?
Give me a second. It's a little off the cuff conversation, but I think I could come up with something. I mean, I can't think of anything like off the top of my head, but I'm sure I could come up with something.
Okay. Well, like for me, an idea that isn't falsifiable isn't a useful idea. Forrest may have different opinions about that, but like until if it's not falsifiable, I've yet to come across any idea that wasn't falsifiable that was also useful to me. Right? Like it's just at that point, it's just whatever. Like it's just the thing that you're holding for personal reasons. So unless Forrest has other questions, that would, I guess, be my challenge for you, would be to call back, think of something that's falsifiable about Norse paganism. Since your best affirmation was, it helped me find keys. And I was able to say that other religions have found also, keys.
I mean, that was just a more like concrete example that I gave that, happened recently. It's also the reason why I'm still alive. So there's that as well.
Finding your keys kept you alive, or what?
Well, no, just like practicing the religion. It helped me overcome a lot of
that's the same thing that Christians say all the time. I can't tell you how many Christians I've talked to that say that the Christianity got them through addiction, got them through prison, got them out of an abusive whatever, that it gave them hope. When I was doing a show at the Atheist Community of Austin one time, one of the Bibles they had there literally has printed on the front cover, if you are struggling with suicidal thoughts, you'll find answers within and shit. Like, they are, lots of religions can claim these benefits, and lots of people can claim that these religions have helped them. So again, like, it just, you're talking about evidence that is just very personal to you, and it's the exact same kind of evidence that every other religious person gives for anything ever. My question is still, how many children starved to death while, hell was there helping you find your keys? So how useful is this God? I think Paul's gambit is really good. Is there a way that you could be proven wrong? If not, what's the good in believing this thing? But overall, I don't know. It sounds like through this entire call, your entire argument has been, yeah, I know other religions say this thing, but I'm right, though. And yeah, I understand that Christians say this, but Christianity isn't right. I'm right. And that just isn't a reason for us to take this claim seriously. I'm happy something works for you. It's probably more benign than most monotheistic religions and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, I still care about whether or not it's true. And as someone who grew up with some of these same deities in my childhood and have known people that like them a lot, I just don't think it's true. I just don't think it's worth it.
Yeah, and I'm not, out here like trying to convert people and evangelizing everything. This is what I'm personally convinced of, and I'm here to just have a conversation about what's convinced me personally, why I believe what I believe, that sort of thing. I'm not trying to force it on the people like Christian.
I don't think you are.
And I feel like
I don't think you are. But you brought it up and you wanted to discuss it, and I'm telling you, I don't think that you have a good reason to believe in these things.
Mm-hmm.
Think about that falsification. Think about those falsification criteria and call back another time.
We look forward to it.
Yeah.
Until then, I'll leave you with the wise words of Jesse Jerdak in the chat, who says, atheism has helped me save a lot of lives, and I agree with that. Have an awesome rest of your day, Nix. Bye-bye. Not a bad call. Not combative or anything like that. I'm having a hard time over here with my body being what it is, but not a bad situation. We've got 2 calls left on the line. One is an atheist and one is an agnostic. That means we have plenty of lines open for theists. If you want to call in and tell us about why your God is definitely real, if you want to do what Nix wasn't doing and tell us why we should believe as well, that is the call that we're looking for. If you don't believe in evolution or an old earth or a big bang, if you do believe in Jesus and God and the Bible, if you want to discuss the science of homosexuality or trans people or whatever, if you want to discuss the historicity of the Gospels or the reliability of the Old versus the New Testament, if you want to talk about what cult you think is the best, this is the show for you. 918. It's 720-619-2288, or use the web link down in the description. We have lines open for you. Let's talk to Hayden, pronouns he, him, calling in all the way from...
I love tiny nipples.
Who wants to talk about the historicity of the Gospels, probably mostly with Paul. Welcome to the line. How are you today?
Doing good.
So what specifically did you want to discuss? Paul's probably going to be all over this call, and I'm just going to be here like a little cheerleader guy who will occasionally bring up bad points.
How you doing, Hayden?
I was just curious. Good. I was just curious, how much real history do you think is in the gospel accounts of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John?
Me personally, this is just a personal survey of checking in with Forrest and Paul and how much.
Both.
I mean, I waffle on that on a regular basis. I do think I go from anywhere to be it's entirely fabricated by Mark, that Mark really sat down to the more likely scenario. Normally, I would say the more likely scenario is that there was a person or persons in Galilee in first century Palestine who was an apocalyptic preacher who said certain things. I can give reasons for the handful of things that I think are probably true. I think he probably was from Nazareth. I think he was probably baptized by John the Baptist. And I think he probably was crucified. That's probably that's the three things I would probably fight most vigorously for against the mythicist. Forrest may have a different opinion. But again, I waffle. I waffle all over the place. So what do you think, Hayden? How reliable do you think they are, and why?
Well, even though I don't really personally believe in it, I will say that it's still one of the things I'm quite unsure about, because, could people really start a legend just from scratch and make up the person and it actually succeed as a religion?
Well, why not? What would be the barrier for that not to happen?
So there has to be some kind of some link to reality for people just to onto it.
Do you think there was a historical Zeus upon which Zeus was based?
Absolutely not. That's ridiculous.
Okay, then why must there have been a Jesus figure upon which it was based?
Just the way the gospel accounts are written, so there's some parts that could positively have been sayings a real person.
Oh, well, okay, but there's lots of there's fictional characters throughout history, right?
There's fictional characters in the Bible
who are written convincingly. I'm not arguing for mythicism, but I'm curious as to what you think is this magical barrier that would prevent it from happening.
I don't think it's impossible for a religion just to start from scratch, people making up claims. I just feel like a religion that does the claims that it does, it has the people. These people were pretty sure they existed. They're written about in some historical texts. I think Josephus writes about Jesus' brother.
Well, if you interpret that to mean brother instead of cousin, yeah. But again, I'm with you that or actually brother. If you mean a non-spiritual brother, because Christians did call each other, brother Peter, it was already known at the time that, just like when I went to church, people called me brother Paul, and I would call people brother so and so. That was a greeting that was used at the time. That said, what about the Gospels makes you think that the authors believed that it was historical fact?
Because I feel at the beginning of Luke, whoever was compiling it, either Luke or whoever, seems to be pretty certain that they've done investigative work into the claims that they're about to make in the book.
Interesting. So, do you think that Luke was an eyewitness of anything,
or did he interview? Line of the book.
Yeah. So he interviewed. So Luke is I think probably your worst possible example, right? Because he flagrantly says that this is these are reports I compiled.
Yeah, he does. I can pull it up and I can read it. Yeah, so that
No.
you may know the exact truth about the things you've been taught.
Like, Luke doesn't say that he saw any of this stuff. So would you agree that Mark is the first written gospel?
Yes, based on all the shit that
Okay. So let's just talk about Mark then. What makes you think that Mark? Because if anyone fabricated it, it has to be Mark, right? If it's whole cloth fabricated, Mark's got to be implicated. I would say. So what makes you think that Mark thinks that he's reporting history versus reporting theology?
it's just that, like, the way that it's written to me, it has this, like, sort of sincerity to it. Like, the people who are writing it didn't, like, it sort of feels real in the way that it's written. I know it sounds ridiculous to say that, and I sound kind of stupid now realizing what you're saying, because I don't really believe it happened. Just, I think I have a hard time actually deconstructing, sort of separating it from, like, being totally fake. Kind of the claims people make about these gospels, sort of making you think it possibly has some truth to it.
What if I told you that I also believed that the author of Mark was very sincere, that what he was saying was spiritually true?
Mm-hmm.
Does that in any way tell us whether or not the events described are historically true, in the way that, like, if we had a video camera going, that we would have been able to see the events as described?
It does not.
So sincerity isn't a marker of historical accuracy, right?
Yes.
Okay. So where are we at this point? Do you still have other reasons why you think that the Gospels are historically reliable beyond the qualia of sincerity?
There's some locations and people that are described in the Gospels that are pretty accurate to how they were in real life, like Pontius Pilate, for example.
Okay. He's pretty famous, right? He's written about in a lot of different books.
Mm-hmm.
So, are you aware that Spider-Man met Barack Obama?
They have heard about that before.
Does that lend credence to there being a radioactively bitten spider crime fighter in New York City during the Obama administration?
I think it does.
You think it does? It lends, like, that's evidence of Peter Parker?
No.
The fact that he met.
I don't.
Okay. Okay.
I don't think it does.
So the figure, like, you're talking about people like Herod, you're talking about people like Pontius Pilate, you're talking about locations like Jerusalem and cities in Galilee. Like, these are just common knowledge things of the people who lived in the area or adjacent to the area, right? Like, there's nothing spectacular that has been verified, right? That beyond city names and things.
Not necessarily, no. There hasn't been anything verified. Like, we can't say, yeah, for sure that guy was healed or anything like that.
Right. So, do you know what the word verisimilitude? I don't mean to sound condescending. I use a word in my writing. I have a history of working in the film industry, and I've done some writing. So we have a term we use called verisimilitude. Does that word mean anything to you?
I've heard of it. Could you explain to me what it means?
Sure, yeah. And so verisimilitude is what a note you'll get from your editor when you say they want you to insert details that ground the story in things that ground the story in because if you're telling spectacular things, you want to have details line up. It's a specific author choice made to give the reader points of connection, so that when you send the reader off of points where they can't connect, that they can feel grounded. So, for example, in the first Avengers film, at the end, when Tony Stark has has crash landed, and he's saved the day. He's landing there. He says, "Hey, there's a shawarma place down the corner. Who wants to go try shawarma?" If you go to, at least at the time the Avengers was filmed, if you went to that place in New York, there was indeed a shawarma place on that street. Right? Like, that was a detail they actually added in filming. They improvised that line because of the shawarma place they wanted to try. Right? Like, so that's a point of verisimilitude. So if you were writing a story that you wanted people to believe about Jesus, would you not include the names of the rulers who are known to be, in charge? The names. If there was going to be a trial, would you not say it was Pilate who would have been the historical individual? Like, are any of these details surprising to you to say, well, this can only be historical, or might they be points of verisimilitude?
Well, I mean, it is a good point. Just because a historical figure is used doesn't really make it true. There are indeed plenty of fictional stories that use real people, aren't there?
There are indeed. Even in that day.
Really?
Indeed, there's lots of stories about Alexander the Great or Julius Caesar. Like, they appear in fictional works. Like, it's not a thing that is the historical novel wasn't invented, although as a specific genre maybe, but like adding points of verisimilitude is not something new. For example, the Odyssey is full of, like, the city of there were battles of Troy, for example. Like, there's details that overlap. So I guess you're saying, you're acknowledging at this point that having those details doesn't make it historical. Are you still feeling like there's a good reason to think that the Gospels have a strong level of historicity?
The more I think about it, the less and less I think there is, which is why I called, because I feel like, as we constructed from the supernatural claims themselves, it's sort of this like feeling of like which parts of it were true, and could it possibly make the supernatural claims true? But the more you kind of talk about how, there's not a lot of evidence for it, the people, just because there's some real people in the story, doesn't really make it true as well. So I'm not really quite sure. I know there's some stuff that scholars debate, like the census, and I think, is it Luke or not, Mark?
Yep, in Luke. Yeah, Mark doesn't have any Christmas story at all. So yeah, you were right about that. What did you want to say about the census, the Quirinius census?
I think there's a lot of debate over if it's like a continuity error, it's like history.
There's actually relatively little debate that it is a continuity error, to the extent that really when Christian apologists talk about it, what they want to say is maybe Quirinius did two censuses, because they will acknowledge that the only census we have is that there were no censuses at the time that made people go to their homeland. And how would that even make sense if you think about that story, right? Like, let's say we said, Forrest, you have to go register to be taxed, go to the land of your forefathers, the city where your forefathers lived, and register there. Which forefather would he pick? His dad, his grandpa, his great-great-grandpa? Who would even care? If you... Like,
all I know is that I'd be getting free health care because I'd be somewhere in Eastern Europe.
Right? So the logistics of this census that's described in Luke is pretty... It's ahistorical in terms of it. Most people would agree that it's ahistorical. What apologists do is say, well, it's not implausible, but certainly our historical records don't jive with it. The other problem, of course, is that the dates of Matthew and Luke conflict. Right. So Matthew wants to relate Jesus, when Jesus was born, to when Herod was ruling, and if you want to say that Quirinius did this census while he was governor, we know that those didn't happen at the same time. There's a 10-year span between them. So, that's a problem as well. I don't tend to care a lot about those kind of contradictions. I feel like if you really believe in the story, you can imagine a harmonization. So I don't think contradiction is a huge deal. But certainly, there's no evidence that census in the way the Bible describes happened. So that's an excellent point. Did you have other thoughts about that census, or was that kind of...
Why do you think obviously I know the gospel authors were aware of each other. Why do you think they created two entirely different accounts? And why doesn't Mark include the virgin birth compared to the other two, and then three?
What makes you think that Mark... So let me back up. You acknowledged, you agreed with me that Mark was written first. And do you know why they consider Mark to be written first?
They're not quite certain about that. No.
That's fair. So the reason why they are quite certain that Mark was written first is that both Matthew and Luke copy virtually the entire book, virtually verbatim, but not verbatim. So they both, Matthew and Luke, both make subtle changes to Mark, and where they make changes, it tends to be like grammar improvements or things that solidify the story towards Christianity being true versus further away. And so when they evaluate that, they say, well, what makes the most sense? Would it make most sense that Mark came later, copied portions of Matthew and Luke, and made them worse? That doesn't seem likely. So they're pretty sure that Mark came first. It has the most basic and least sophisticated Greek. Then Matthew and Luke came along and copied virtually every verse and included that. So when you say, why did they write different accounts? Mark, I don't think was ever had it in his head that other people were going to take his work and plagiarize it. He probably didn't know about that, and probably obviously wouldn't have been a factor when he was writing. Why did Matthew and Luke make changes? Well, Matthew, there's several goals in Matthew. One of them is to more clearly link Jesus to Old Testament prophecy. That seemed to be one of his main goals. Also, it seemed like there were polemics going around, people like saying, well, how do we know that Jesus' body wasn't stolen, or other things like that? So Matthew introduces guards at the tomb, for example. Matthew introduces virgin birth, where Mark is entirely silent about it. Again, directly to connect prophecy, right? So that seems like, at least that was one of Matthew's goals. Luke, on the other hand, seemed to be not only wanting to do some of those things, but seemed to be fighting against an adoptionist view, where people were saying, by reading Mark, they were saying, oh, well, Jesus wasn't born God's son. He became God's son at the baptism, because God says from heaven, today you are my son. I forget the rest of the phrase, but today you are my son. Right? And so Luke was evidently fighting that. Luke also didn't like that in Mark, Jesus was suffering every single pain and, was tired and all that kind of thing. Every time Jesus was having a hard time in Mark, Luke whitewashes that and makes it say, no, Jesus knew exactly what he's doing. He felt no pain. That's part of when you introduce contradictions, you kind of look at those and say, they even have different last words. So it seems like Matthew and Luke both felt that Mark was deficient for their own theology. So as one does, one writes another book. But in the day, plagiarism wasn't seen as a negative thing like it is now. Plagiarism was updating someone else's work was seen to be fully fair and a valid thing to do. So that explains the three synoptic gospels. Then you've got John, who clearly more and more scholars acknowledge that John, definitely written decades later after these, had copies of Matthew, Mark, and Luke available to him, but he chose to tell the stories very differently because he had this high Christology. He, instead of having virgin birth, he just starts saying, Jesus was with God before the earth was even created. And he starts, that's how he starts. And he throughout it constantly has Jesus saying, I'm God, I'm at weddings and I'm converting wine, and every time anyone asks me, I'm telling them all about how I'm God. Whereas in Mark, every time he heals somebody, he says, don't tell anyone. Whatever you do, don't tell anybody. So again, it just seems like the earlier work wasn't meeting the theological needs of the later writers. And so the theological needs of the later writers are why we had multiple versions. And then, of course, the four canonical Gospels are not the only ones we have. We have a gospel of Thomas. We have a gospel of Pilate. We have a gospel of I forget all the various non-canonical gospels that we've got going. Again, each of those had their own theological agenda where they updated the stories that we have in the gospel. So this was a cottage industry, right? Telling stories about Jesus to meet your theological bent. So I wouldn't characterize it the way. I'm sorry?
Were they trying to replace the previous gospel that came before? Like, were they competing to see like which version of the story was like the preferred one?
I would argue they were, because back in that day, the only way you got a book was by literally borrowing someone's book and copying it, or paying someone to copy it. So this notion that people would have wanted to have a library of books, that would have been, you'd have had to be incredibly elite and wealthy to be able to do that. Basically, I'm going to forget, but it was multiple days' wages that just to pay for the paper, or the skins that would have been needed to copy a gospel would have been somewhere around a week's wages, if I'm remembering correctly. Like, this was not something that you could do lightly. So certainly, if you are Matthew and Luke and you're copying all of Mark anyway, you're not advocating that someone should also have Mark. You've included all the work. You've made a replacement work. So people can debate that, but in my view, the logistics of it sure seem like they were trying to replace the other versions.
Okay, so I guess they were never really intended to be read side by side, like how Christians do it today.
In my view, they were not. And, I've talked about this with, I'm not going to throw out names, but I've talked about this with scholars, and that tends to be the consensus.
And I guess for me, the thing, I always just sort of assume that they were all just written to provide information to believers who believe in the same things that appear.
But why do that? Like, so if you're Matthew, for example, there's a story in Matthew of when he meets Jesus. So if you're Matthew and you're writing that story, that's probably a pretty big day in your life. So what you probably wouldn't say if you were Matthew was, well, let me copy it from Mark, who wasn't there. Let me just, Mark wrote about the day I met Jesus. I'll just copy that one and not even put my own name in it. But that's what we have in Matthew. We have Mark's version, and Mark doesn't even pretend to be there. So again, it's just a weird, if you want to say that these are eyewitnesses wanting to lend their own perspective, that sure seems like a day where Matthew would have wanted to lend his own perspective, but didn't.
Does Mark ever claim any eyewitnesses were there? I wasn't sure Mark ever does.
At what point?
Not certain. Doesn't it quote? Sometimes I get the Gospels confused in my head. Like I read, when you're at church, they tend to just sort of mash everything together, so I get sort of confused.
They sure do. Yep. In fact, I just did a video about Jordan Peterson, who literally advocates that Christians read this. He an author friend of his mashed all the Gospels together into one so that you wouldn't have those pesky contradictions. And that's what he thinks you should read. So anyway, churches tend to do that. Well, your question was, does Mark talk about eyewitnesses? I guess it depends on which story you're talking about, or pericope as they call it. Do you have something in mind?
Is it Mark where it claims that John the Baptist saw the Spirit go into Jesus? Is it Mark?
So all four, weirdly, the John the Baptist story is one of the stories that all four feel like doing. And when you open this call, how much historicity, I kind of feel like John the Baptist in his day was much more famous than Jesus. I feel like all these stories are trying to take the reputation of John the Baptist and say our guy's better. Anyway, the question is, does it have the Spirit coming down? No, that's the John version. But there is a voice in all four versions.
Doesn't he say different things in each version?
That is correct. That was one of the problems I brought up, right? Because Mark wants to say, "Oh, today you're my son," if I'm remembering correctly. and then, but that's a problem if you have an adoptionist view that Jesus was just a human that God favored. So that's one of the reasons that scholars think that it was changed in some of the other versions. So yeah, that if you think that these are eyewitness accounts, it's a little strange that what God says from heaven. Every time I've heard God speak from heaven, I've remembered exactly, which is that's a silly thing to say, but it seems like an important part of your life. If you heard God speaking from heaven, you'd probably remember the gist of what was said. Anyway. Hayden, is this still a helpful conversation? I don't want to go round and round and bore our audience. I don't know how the chat is feeling about the conversation. It does feel like you've softened a bit on how historical you think the Gospels are.
Well, I would agree. Yeah, I think it's been a helpful conversation, and I didn't intend to drag this conversation on forever. I was just curious what you answer my questions just fine. I guess it's just kind of like a lot of things that believers tend to do is they tend to boast about how the Gospels are the most incredible historical accounts you ever put to a page or something like that.
They do like to, and I'll put myself in that boat, Hayden. When I was a Christian, because I just accepted at face value what my pastors and what my Bible school teachers told me, they would make claims like that. The resurrection is the best attested fact in ancient history. Okay, I'll repeat that. Or they would say something like, there are more ancient manuscripts of the New Testament than any other ancient document in history, and just say, okay, that's really good evidence, not thinking about the fact that, again, it costs someone a week's wages and how much of their time to copy a thing in the book. And popularity has nothing to do with how true it is, right? So the fact that the unpopular books, there's fewer manuscripts, and the popular manuscripts is more, again, that's not that great a claim. So Christians, and I was one of them, will often say things that they don't think through about whether or not that's good evidence. It just sounds good in the moment. And maybe you're experiencing that same thing, that people are making grandiose claims that sound good in the moment, but when someone else comes along to interrogate, maybe isn't as good.
I very little.
Yeah. So again, I would say I've been studying this. I've been studying this for a long time now. I've been studying the Bible most of my life. I went to Bible college. I believed it back then, but I have yet to come across anything that makes me think that these are 4 eyewitness accounts. If anything, scholarship that doesn't have to sign a statement of faith tends to agree that these are constructions at very least, that these are not, at best, they could be grounded in eyewitness accounts and are not written by eyewitnesses. Again, we didn't even get into the fact that, anyone living and hanging around with Jesus would have spoke Aramaic, and the Gospels are all written in Greek. And so weirdly, how would all of them translate the Aramaic into Greek in a compatible fashion? Like, again, it strains credulity. The Gospels also specifically say that the disciples didn't go to school; they were unschooled, ordinary men. So how did they write in Greek, in a language they probably didn't speak? These things tend to snowball and compound.
Yeah, I think this has been a great conversation. Yes.
Okay.
Go now. But I appreciate the
Hayden, you let me talk about one of the things I'm most passionate about in life, so I will not complain. But I do want to just make sure that we're mindful of the audience. I loved this conversation. If you want to call back next time I'm on, if you learn some things, and I would encourage you to go learn some things that either refute things I said or might be new angles that I haven't talked about here, I would love to chat with you again.
Thank you much.
Thanks, Hayden.
All right.
I'm sorry, Forrest. I just went off on.
No. As I said at the beginning of the call, this was definitely more in your wheelhouse than mine.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to just let you take it. I've been over here working on stuff. So
that's good.
No problem. I paid attention, and so far as I learned a few, I was trying to pick up some stuff, but it is so far afield from anything that I usually do. I didn't want to interrupt.
Exactly. Well, hopefully we'll have hopefully have some biology calls, and you'll get to do some work.
Maybe if
We'll
everybody
see.
hits the
We'll
like
see.
button, we'll get some more calls.
Oh yeah, we
Who knows?
need likes. We need and if in fact, not only that, if you had holiday season last week with your family and you were if you're biting your tongue because you didn't want to have those conversations with your family, maybe this would be a good opportunity to send this link. We don't have as many calls as we want in the queue, so send this to your family who you were biting your tongue, and let us have the awkward conversation you didn't want to have.
Right? For real.
Yeah.
I would love to fight your family for you. I
That's right.
wore I have a sweater. I should have produced it here, but it's in the wash right now. But like I wore a sweater to my family Christmas. It's Joseph and Mary holding little baby Jesus, and it says, "Whose goddamn white baby is this?" And I have a big Mexican family, and so like it went over well, except for some of them. But like, oh man,
That's amazing.
We have a couple people on the line right now. One person is currently getting through the screening room, and that'll definitely be our next call if we can get them in quickly. So I'm going to stall for just a second. But like Paul said, we have plenty of lines open. As of this moment, we have 2 people waiting to talk. So 720-619-2288. If you are a religious person out there who wants to challenge what we think, what we have to say, this is your chance. We have pretty open show. You'll get on very quickly. Or if you're outside of the US, use that web link down in the description and talk to us about whatever your god or gods or theistic beliefs. If you have questions or comments about science, you heard Paul is able to very articulately go into the Gospels for a little while. I can throw in some dumb stuff. This is your chance to have serious conversations with people that want to have them. It doesn't just have to be a screaming match between, different opposing sides or dunking on one another. It can actually be productive if you're willing to talk. We are willing to talk. But as for right now, we're going to take this call. It is Lamont, pronouns he and him, who just got through the screen. This is the person I was stalling for a second because this is absolutely the next call that we would need because it is a little bit more something that seems that we have different opinions on. Lamont, who wants to know, do I think that transphobes are bigoted in only one direction? What does that mean? Lamont, you're on the line with Forrest and Paul. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Today's my birthday. It's also my birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thanks. Well,
so I don't know what you mean by your question. We want to hear about it.
Okay. Well, I was just wondering, since I watch this show a lot, all you ever hear is them complaining about, the trans women are in the women's room hurting women, and the trans women can't play women's sports. I think I'm not wrong. I never hear about complaining about the trans men. It's always one directional.
Yep.
Like, we gotta protect the men from the trans.
That's also the case because transphobia at its core is the blending of homophobia and sexism. And so it's always going to be taking pot shots at women all the time. And there's a few different reasons for that. But I've heard plenty of hate about trans men too.
That's terrible, but yeah. I was wondering, you don't hear a lot about it.
So are you asking like why? Or are you asking like if hatred toward trans men exists at all? Like what are you asking about?
Yeah. Well, I guess both. I don't hear much about it.
I think there's a few reasons to dig into here that I've explored on this. Like I said, the biggest one is that transphobia is the diarrhea martini that is blended up from homophobia and sexism. And so it's gonna have that deep root in misogyny. That is, you are now attacking a woman, even a trans woman. That's you're cool to do that. Also, there is a lot of that internalized toxic masculinity where you are now seeing what you perceive to be a man who is switching teams, who is cheating, who is, being a traitor, playing for the enemy, right? And that does a couple of things. Number one, it's an insult to you that you think that this person is going to go off and violate your man team and go join the opposing side. Also, it tells you that's possible, and it makes you realize that maybe your masculinity isn't as concrete as you thought it was. As evidenced by the fact that the same people who say you'll always be a man and nothing can ever change that are oftentimes the same exact fucking people that would tell a gay man, you're not a real man, and you're never going to be a man like me, and I'm more man than you. Or would use that as an insult to somebody that I'm a better man or more of a man. So it's just that whole, like, really, really just deeply internalized, bigoted thing that is now being used as a weapon against what they perceive as either weaker men and or women. And when trans men come up, they look like dudes. This is a guy with muscles and a beard and male pattern baldness or whatever else, and like they're not going to have that reaction to that person. It just it doesn't cross their mind in the same way, as far as I can attest.
I just would add one thing there as a former evangelical who is in evangelical circles, and when you're in the same circle, people even will admit to what the reason is. And again, I'll go back to film for reference, but it's the crying game syndrome. I don't know if you're familiar with the movie Crying Game, but for the audience, it's an old enough movie I can spoil it for you. But there's a character who is attracted to a woman who he halfway through a makeout session discovers that they were not fully transitioned yet, and there is a non-trivial portion of it is the general fear that you might accidentally be attracted to someone who you don't perceive to be, or unfortunately you perceive them to be a woman, but you find out they're not a woman in the way that you thought they weren't that way at birth. Yeah. That you like, and that is a threat. That is a threatening thing. I've heard that expressed to me to my face that is the reason. So anyway.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Is that fear that you might accidentally like a trans girl, and there's also that you mentioned movies. There's other shit like the fucking Sleepaway Camp and like Ace Ventura, where being transgender, specifically a trans woman, was part of the horror of the villain. You know what I mean? And so it's like that's kind of just how that's been portrayed for a long time, and it's. I think there's definitely a cultural component there.
Yeah, my niece's firstborn isn't trans, but they are non-binary, so I try to fight this stuff whenever I can. Try to help fight it whenever I can.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's why I usually encourage when we talk about this stuff, like one of the things that if someone is being receptive to a conversation, I love to encourage just, hey, go make more friends. You know what I mean? Because I guarantee these people that you are vilifying and have this weird broad brush picture of in your head, I guarantee they are more individual and diverse than you give them credit for, almost as if they are, get this, people, and they act like people and they behave like people and they think like people and they're as diverse as other people. And so in the same way that I couldn't say all cis people are X, all women are X, all Christians are X, all Republicans are X, pick your favorite, whatever social category you like. I can't say the same thing about trans people on any end of the spectrum there. And that's kind of hard for a lot of folks to wrap their heads around, because they really, what they get in the news is just, it's this fucking sicko who wanted to put on a dress and perv on people in the bathroom. And that is literally the entire image that they have in their heads. And so trying to get through that brick wall before you actually get to having a conversation can be difficult. And I hope this helps a little bit. I've dealt with plenty of transphobes, so I can say this is the trend that I've seen. And I hope you don't have the misfortune of dealing with enough transphobes to tell me that there's another trend that I should be keeping track of.
Thanks.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And just like that, I'm going to roll right into this next call, which is also about, it's about the same argument. From David, from him, calling in all the way from the frozen penguin-infested wastelands of Canada, who wants to talk about the arguments against trans people, specifically about this whole transracial idea. David, you were on the line with Forrest and Paul. How are you doing today?
Hi, Forrest and Paul. Can you guys hear me fine?
It's cracking. I can hear you, but it's popping a lot. Do you have your phone on speaker or anything like that?
1 second. Just 1 second. Let me just adjust. Let me clearly know.
Not much better. Can you pull the microphone away from your face, maybe?
How about this?
Try talking one more time, please.
So sorry, Forrest. Can I try and just rejoin through the web browser? I think my phone is just playing up.
Yes. Yeah, just
Thank you
call
so much.
back. We'll get you in right away. It sounded like a connection issue there, like maybe because he's calling on from the U.S. From outside the U.S. He was on a web caller, so it might have just been some scraggly nonsense there. So we'll just give.
I was also going to say, yeah, if you can go hardline instead of Wi-Fi, that's also better. But.
Yeah. We'll see what we can do. By the way, to the people in the chat who consistently don't recognize me being stupid when I talk about Canada being a frozen penguin-infested wasteland, and a lot of people in chat talk about penguins in Canada. What you need to understand is that Canada is terrible, and I stand by every word that I said. I hate them all and their stupid penguin pets. I don't know what their penguins are doing up there, but I think they're running the government, and they're trying to take away our guns and our jobs, and I won't stand for it here in the land of the free. Get it through your heads. Okay, so let's take David back on now. David,
as you sit beside a Canadian too, it's lovely. Yeah, okay. David.
Yeah, well, I want to be your friend so you can learn how much better America is, and maybe you can come here and be free someday. You know?
Yes, that's what I hear. That's what I hear.
Hi guys, can you hear me a bit better now?
That's a little bit better. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just
cool.
we'll
sorry
struggle
about
through.
that.
Yep.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. Basically, I just wanted to run over my understanding of, and I apologize if I get anything wrong. Please correct me.
Yeah.
Basically, the concept of being transgender is when your gender and your sex don't match, and I will preface this by saying that I believe that everyone has the right to identify as how they would like to, and as how they are. And in terms of gender, which is a complete social construct, it allows for that identity to be a lot more fluid. And in terms of my understanding of race is equally, if not more, I don't know, I suppose it's equally as much of a social construct. And I don't know, I feel, and again, I could be wrong, but I feel like the whole being able to identify as a different race is not as easy. Not to say that I did, like, trans people have it easy, but like if you were phenotypically a white person, but you identify as a black person or vice versa or whatever, it's not as much accepted, or is it? What's your guys' thoughts on that?
So you are correct that both race and gender are social constructs. That isn't to say that there is absolutely nothing biological about either one of them. I mean, your phenotype that lets us categorize you racially, of course, that is a biological thing. The categorization system of race is socially developed, right? Same thing with gender, where like we can point to things in your brain or things in your hormones or things to whatever that we can start to say, okay, there's a neurochemical thing here that is associated with gender. What we can't do is say you have blank characteristic, therefore you are this gender, right? We can't do that. And so yes, it is true that both race and gender are social constructs. In order to elucidate a little bit about why transracial arguments don't make sense, let's compare race to a different social construct. Let's say money, for example. Money is a social construct, right? There are no dollar bills growing on trees somewhere out in the world, right? And so the value of money and how money is used and all these things, these are all socially constructed things. Just like race, the circumstances of your birth have something to do with your wealth, right? The circumstances of your birth, how you're born, to whom you're born, your genetic history, all these things have to do with your race. Similarly, just who you're born to, where you're born, that has to do with your socioeconomic status. Unlike race, your wealth can change over the course of your life based on your own decisions and external factors around you, economic changes, how much your currency is worth in the long, or people stealing from you, right? No one can come steal your black away from you, right? That can't happen. And there's no way that we can have this magic change in the society where you can, go out and be like, I'm going to be more Mexican today. It just that doesn't happen, right? And so just because these two things are social constructs does not mean they can be treated the same way. And it doesn't mean that they have some characteristics that are similar, yeah, but there are other ones that are not. And it's the same thing now if we look back at gender. Do the circumstances of your birth influence that? Sure. Fundamentally, if you're to tell whether you're cis or trans, is whether or not you have gender incongruence. So, like, in a way, yeah. But also, it has a lot more to do with self-identification and discovery of like who you are than, say, race would. In a way that race is more something that society tells you what you are. You don't wake up and discover a little bit more about yourself or do some soul searching for that. So to compare race and gender and saying, well, they're both social constructs, so kind of treat them the same way, it's like saying my boots and my wallet are both made of leather, so I should keep my money in my boot and walk around with my feet in my wallet. That's not really how it works. Just because they share one characteristic doesn't mean they share all of them. Does that help?
Kind of. I'm still a bit lost in terms of I kind of get the comparison towards money, but like where you lose me is wait sorry, am I still here?
You are.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, where you lose me is if I compare money, if I have X amount of money, I can substantiate, whether I fall into, some kind of wealth category like mid or rich or poor or whatever. But a racial category is, for me, it's almost impossible to measure that. Like, if someone says, if someone is phenotypically black, but they don't identify with black culture, or they just reject the idea altogether, or they don't want to be categorized like that, I don't see why they should not be able to. And in theory, shouldn't society also accept that kind of thinking?
It's important to differentiate here what we're talking about when we talk about how these social constructs actually work. So it's like, remember, when we're talking about social systems, any kind of social identification, self-identification is going to be a major part of it. So you're right to say, like, it's difficult to measure someone's race, like quantitatively, quantitatively measure someone's race, right? You're not X%, whatever. But race is fundamentally rooted in ethnicity. Despite the fact that our racial categorization system is arbitrary and broken, it is fundamentally rooted in where your ancestry is from, right? And so we can quantify that a little bit, and we can deal with that a little bit. Also, race is not just an internal thing, it's also reflexive. You put it out to the society by existing, and society then responds to you in kind. A black person can't identify as white and suddenly have less of a chance of experiencing police brutality in this country, for example, right? So it's just not really comparable in that way. And also, you can compare it to even further social constructs that are even more difficult to quantify or to measure. Take, for example, the political spectrum or religion, right? How can I tell if someone is actually a Democrat? They can identify that to me because that is a social system that we live in, and so it is inherently rooted in self-identification. But if say they're a Democrat and they vote for Donald Trump every single time, I can't tell them, hey, you're fundamentally not a Democrat. I can say you're not behaving like a Democrat, but that is up to them to say. Same thing with Christianity. Listen to the calls that we take on these shows, and we hear Christians of all stripes that say faith alone gets you into heaven, works alone get you into heaven. The Bible is completely true. The Bible is completely metaphorical. Jesus was real, and it's actually just a relationship with the Holy Spirit, and all different men. I can't tell one of them you're not a Christian because it is a self-identification thing. They are telling me what it means to them to be a Christian. And then the world has to respond to them. Other Christians, other religious institutions are then going to judge them and behave however they're going to that person based on the presentation they put out. So it's the same thing with all these things. Is that going to work the same way with race or gender? Differently, right? It's totally different situations. I can't tell somebody, hey, you're not Asian or whatever like that. I can actually do a DNA test. Meanwhile, gender, it's going to be a little bit different. Or sexuality. How can I tell someone you're not actually gay because you haven't had enough butt sex for me to decide? It just, that isn't how. So each one of these is going to be a different situation, and they're going to be treated differently. They're going to be measured differently, if indeed they can be measured at all. They're going to be put out into the world differently. The world is going to respond to them differently. The one thing that unites them all is that they are socially constructed things. And therefore, they are going to be fluid. They're going to be spectral. They're going to change from society to society, from generation to generation, from person to person, sometimes from day to day. That is the one thing that is true for all of these things. But having one be totally rooted in or totally determined by self-identification, where it's like, hey, you can tell me what is going on here. I don't have a way to measure that from one day to the next or from one person to the next. So I'm just going to have to take your word for it. That doesn't apply to all of them. And so it would be silly to try to equate two of them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get you. I suppose my last question would be, I agree that, just because you self-identify in a specific way doesn't mean that society will accept or react accordingly, like the example that you used, where if a black person stops identifying as black, that doesn't mean that the system is going to suddenly treat them a little bit better.
Right.
But what about like yourself? Would you like if someone who's phenotypically brown, I'm just making up a race, and they suddenly they feel that they identify more with the white community, would you personally accept that?
Me personally, I wouldn't have much to say because I have a very different view on race than a lot of other people do because of my training. But just from the general perspective, I can say it's not up to me to tell someone how to treat their heritage or their culture or their ethnicity. So I'm trying to avoid the extremely pedantic way that I myself specifically would handle the situation, because as someone with training in anthropology, I can tell you that the concept of whiteness as a whole is a white supremacist ideology, right? So it's a whole thing that has a lot of baggage here that needs to be unpacked. But I can say that I would definitely raise an eyebrow if someone were to come up to me and try to say I have self-identified as a different race. I would definitely have a lot of questions and a lot of assumptions about that. But I'm not here to tell anybody how to handle their ethnicity or their culture. That's for you to explore and decide. But also the reality of the society that you live in is still really important. And the reality of the history of these racial categories is really important. So that might be a really stupid thing to do. And that would be a case-by-case basis. Anyway, I hope this helps.
That's fair. I get you.
I hope this helps kind of elucidate a little bit why these things are different. Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
The only thing I would add there is that, as you're thinking about this more, just think about the fact that I personally know and hear the stories over and over again. People have a certain view of what their own ethnicity, what their own race is, and they'll get a DNA test and find out that it isn't, in fact, what they thought it was. Right? That's a reality we live in, and that just tells you that the biological factors are so slushy about all this that I think I'm Germanic, but I could take a test and find out that I'm Scandinavian, right? Or I could or that I'm even half African or something, right? It's just a weird question.
It's also tricky because if we're talking just about say, for example, black people, saying black and talking about specifically African Americans is a very different racial construct than any other black person anywhere else in the world. Any black person anywhere throughout Africa, that is a very different concept of race than we're talking about black people just who are here in Americans. So it's a whole thing, man.
Exactly.
Also, I want to just shout out the person in the chat who just sent the super chat saying, as a black trans woman, I'm so fucking tired of this shit. It's okay. Some white cis dudes are discussing it, so it's fine.
That's right.
This is
right.
Yeah. As just for some transparency, that's what prompted my question, because I am actually from Africa. I'm in Canada now, and I have a friend at work, and he's English, and he's phenotypically, what Americans would call black. But I was explaining to him that, like, where I'm from, you would be considered. We call it. It's. I know it's derogatory in America, but where I'm from, it's referred to as colored or mixed race. And I was telling him that the black people back home would not accept you for, like, if you said that you were black, they would literally not accept you. And then it got a bit of an interesting conversation out of it, because it just highlights how all over the world these terms mean completely different things, and I think it's ridiculous. But obviously
those are offensive terms here in America, and it's because of the history of those people. And like I said, the concept of blackness as a whole is going to be treated differently here in America, because if you go anywhere else, you probably have some maybe concept of where you're from and why in your history. And here in America, that was ripped away from these people, and so they've had to have this whole new community and this whole new kind of culture of African Americans specifically as the subset. And so it's a whole other thing. And that's a big part of why this racial categorization system, that's a great example of why it isn't scientific in the first place. It is, well, I shouldn't say not scientific, but not a biological construct in the first place. And so it's a whole thing, dude, but just it's important to remember that the point is social categories and social classifications and social identification and all that different stuff, they have the only thing in common is that they are indeed social constructs. And so for a lot of people out there who try to use one to devalue the other or whatever, it just doesn't work out that way. And if you compare any two other social constructs, it becomes pretty apparent as to why that doesn't work.
Yeah, I'm with you. Thanks, Forrest and Paul. I really appreciate it. I'm a big fan.
Thanks, David.
Thanks for taking my call, guys.
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate the call. It was really cool. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. What a nice dude. All right. We have 3 callers who are currently on the line. Paul, do you have a preference? I see one that's specifically for you.
Yeah, your dealer's choice. I guess we can either go to me or wait for later.
I did the last 2, so I'll do this one for you.
All right.
Stephanie, pronoun she and her, calling in all the way from the armadillo-infested hellscape that is Texas, who wants to ask Paul about a specific thing. Stephanie, you were on the line with Paul, and mostly Paul. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for taking my call. I actually did see a dead armadillo on the road like 2 days ago. It was gross.
It's a nightmare. Yeah.
The thing that happens. But yeah, no, I'm calling because I have been evangelical Christian most of my life, but largely in part to the work of both of you guys and other people, have started to maybe move away from that. My question, though, is for Paul. So you have often said that you can't believe in Christianity because it's not true, but there's also an argument that it can be useful. Do you think that there's a case to be made, sorry if you can hear my dog, for someone remaining a Christian, even though, like, if they believe it's useful, like, because of its usefulness, you view that, like, I get the impression sometimes from watching you, and I could be incorrect, that you view that maybe as, like, an inferior reason for belief? Like, would you think that that would be wrong to remain a Christian because of that? Or, like, what's your take on that?
Yeah, so well articulated. I absolutely do view it as a inferior reason to believe that it's useful, and I'll elucidate a little bit. If one wanted to be purely pragmatic about that and pick, if the reason you want to stick to one religion or other is entirely for pragmatic, useful, utility reasons, then you would shop around for the worldview that you think is most useful. Now, the problem with that, quote unquote, is that at that point, you are personally creating criteria by which to evaluate the religion. So, for example, you might say, well, that my criteria for usefulness is which one makes me most wealthy, or which one causes the least harm, or which one gives me relationships with my family, right? Like, so all of a sudden, you're personally picking criteria by which you're deciding which is most useful, right? And that's that's at that point not only arbitrary, but also at that point, I would argue you could just choose no religions and accept those criteria by which you're evaluating the religions as your goals, and just make up your own way of living that adheres closely to those goals, as opposed to having a middleman of any religion at all, right? So that's only one way one might say it's useful. But if it's ultimately to say, hey, it's because I value X, Y, and Z, and Christianity is a good way to get to X, Y, and Z, then I'm saying, well, why with the middleman? Another pragmatic reason might be that it puts me in a certain community, or it puts me in a in like the U.S., for example, a majority position, and there is pragmatic reasons to want to be with the in-group versus with the out-group, because generally in society, the out-group has a harder time than being in the in-group. That would be a separate pragmatic reason. And again, I consider that to be inferior to is it true? Because that's basically, I mean, one can argue that there's a pragmatism there, and I couldn't fault someone for staying a Christian or staying whatever they are, because that's majority. But again, I think I'm free to say that's an inferior reason to say it. And that's, I've forgotten my specific third point. So I've said a lot of words. Do those things make sense to you before we move on to other parts of it?
Yeah, no, they do make sense. Except that isn't that how most people choose almost any other thing in their life, right? Like, I guess I'm curious why, like, you might choose a certain career or a certain partner, even if that partner or career isn't the best one, right? But there might be other reasons why it would be good to do that. So would those reasons be inferior? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, is religion its own specific category where the truth of it is like a predetermined factor that
that's
that
great.
must be met before other reasons can? You're
leading me perfectly, as if on a script, to what I was going to make my third point. So thank you. So here's the other thing about. So here's the thing about why it's different than it is in a separate category as those things, is that any religion, if not true, wants you to accept it as true, and you need to, in order to accept it as true, you need to adopt a flawed epistemology, and or like science denial, and or accepting things based on authority, like just all the ways your epistemology might be compromised. You may accept fallacies and not recognize them. You're not thinking theologically. Like, all religions, if not true, require you to have a less than optimum epistemology. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, no, I would agree.
Okay. Now, the second you are weakening your epistemology for one category of your life, you are also weakening your epistemology for other categories of your life in order to maintain this belief. So I mentioned one, for example, and one that I was very guilty of was science denial and or discounting scientific endeavors because I needed to maintain that dinosaurs were on the ark 4,000 years ago, right? So I had to make false ideas about other things in order to maintain my poor epistemology. I also, was, I don't think I was the worst at this, but I definitely would have, treated, queer people as second-class citizens, or at least making mistakes in their life. Like, I would have, there's all kinds of decisions that would have spun out for me, and including maybe who I voted for, all those kind of things. And I'm not saying who one should vote for, but I was basing them based on an epistemology that was bad. I was basing them based on ancient book is true, therefore I must vote for person Y. And that's just a bad reason to vote for person Y. Maybe person Y is amazing, but that's a bad reason to vote for them. So, in my view, and this is why I, in limited cases, will even call myself an anti-theist, is that I think that all religions cause you to weaken your epistemology, and when you weaken your epistemology, you are cascading bad decision making to other categories of your life. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that does make sense. Yeah, I would agree. I would say that, but something I've noticed in my change of thinking is that I realize that I never thought that. Like, I find that I never believed in young Earth creationism, and it wasn't something I just didn't believe in it, right? So I'm wondering if, like, even though I would have called myself like a hardcore evangelical Christian, like that wasn't an issue for me. So is it possible that I guess what I'm trying to say is it possible that your epistemology, so you're saying that you have this untrue epistemology that was affecting your view of other things, but what if that was not the case? Do you know what I'm saying? I feel like there's levels of religion. Is it possible to participate in a religion?
Right, but I think I was careful to say if you are accepting the religion as true. If you are, so I get that there are people who sit in church and are actively aware, I'm sitting here in church and that everything the pastor says is bullshit. Right? And that they know that when they're going in, they know they're not going to believe any of it, but they like the club or whatever, right? So at that point, that person's my argument doesn't work for such a person. Their epistemology is fine, theoretically. But the club has benefits that they like.
Is that
now I would
someone morally inferior? Because I find myself in that position.
I don't know that that's inferior because everyone is going to value certain things. I am in a luxury. I fully acknowledge that I am, where I live. I am a male. I am, I have all kinds of advantages that let me value truth over pragmatism, and I understand that is an incredibly privileged position. So I would never say that valuing truth above those things is like a moral betterness or whatever. But I would argue that it is an epistemological betterness. I would argue that it's if one is going to say what I value is truth, and I would call truth as conforming to reality, as adjudicated by predictive power, then I think I am in a better position. But no one is obligated to value truth above all things. It's just not. There are people whose lives are in danger at this very second, for whom what is true, metaphysically true, is priority number 78. Right? Like so.
Right.
I hope I'm clear that way. That like only if one is in a privileged position to put truth at that high level, am I gonna go toe to toe and say I'm better or worse? Does that make sense?
No, totally. And I want to be careful too, because I am also privileged. Like I could say I was not a Christian and my friends and family would be very confused, but they would still accept me. But I'm sure that there are people in, other countries and other social circumstances where your religion is such a part of your social circumstance that to choose to be another religion would make it very difficult. Like for people in those circumstances, like and also because the religion is not just the pursuit of truth in that case. The religion is like the conduit by which social contracts are made and by which relationships are formed. Like, do you see its usefulness in that way? Would you say truth is a higher value than the usefulness of religion? I mean, there's a reason that we have had religion for thousands of years, right? Do you think it's because of that community usefulness?
I do think that the primary benefit that religion offers to anyone is a community and being part of an in-group. And anytime you're in the in-group versus the out-group, there's benefits, right? So it doesn't matter if I'm with the right lion or I'm with the right bonobo or whatever, right? Like there's always, if you're in the in-group, it's better than not being in the in-group. And that is why I gave the example of someone who goes to church and is fully aware that like the metaphysical claims are not true and they're not attempting to harmonize those. I put that person in a better category than the person who sits there and tries to make it work. epistemologically. So I think it's possible to go along to get along in a Middle Eastern Muslim community, for example, not trying to square any of it away, but pragmatically saying, well, I have to. These are the social conventions that we've adopted. Not dissimilar to the fact that sometimes I mow my lawn because I know that it's going to be easier in my community to have my lawn look somewhat like the other neighbors do, even though I think it's stupid, right? Like, so
Yeah.
people can make pragmatic choices, but I don't think they're necessarily epistemologically compromised if they are aware within themselves that that's why they're doing it. Does that make sense?
Mm.
And am I wrong about that?
I feel like that self-awareness is maybe like the key, like not trying to kid yourself to believe something,
Yeah,
but,
it is,
but maybe
because then
acknowledging what it is that you're doing.
Right, because that kind of person isn't using the religion to make cascading bad decisions. Right?
Okay.
Now,
yeah.
This is my personal view. I am still young at this, so like if you want to push back on me and say that I am wrong about that, or there's ways I could improve my worldview on that, let me know. But that's kind of where I stand at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I was curious to hear what your take on that was, because I have heard, especially I just watched your video on Low Bar Bill, and I agree, was terrible in his argument, but that it was kind of the argument he made. Like he did kind of make this argument that you can believe in Christianity because it's true, or you can believe in it because it's practical. Whether, I don't think he meant to believe it, make that argument, but that is kind of what he ended up saying.
Of course, the problem with his view there is largely he does various versions that he tries to dress up, but they're Pascal's wager in philosophical garb, right? Like those are all just like, well, it's better not to burn in hell, so I'm gonna, I don't care about this life. And of course, I think the other thing that if you're going along to get along, if you have a choice in that matter, I feel like you are shortchanging yourself in the one and only life that we know we get, right? Like we have X number of days on this planet. That, in my view, that's all you will get. And I regret how many of them I spent in a basement memorizing scripture and, going to church 4 times a week. Like I kind of wish I had some of that time back. So, there's, again, the cascading decisions that come out of this thing, but Pascal's wager is not I think you probably even would agree that Pascal's wager is not a good reason to believe.
No, well, and also because he's not saying you believe it because it's practical, or you accept Christianity because it's practical. He's saying you need to therefore accept the truth claims because it is practical, which is different from the argument that I'm making. And but I mean, just to push back slightly on what you're saying about the one and only life, I'm a homeschool mom in West Texas. So for my quality of life, it is better. An argument I would make is that it would be better for me to participate in this social group, because there are benefits of having this community that, provided meals when my daughter was in the hospital, and is, has a regular reason for gathering, which I think is really important, but might be difficult to find for me in my particular social, standing in group in this time and place and area that I live in. Does that make sense? So for me, it feels like it would improve the quality of life. And I realize that is a privileged position on my part.
One question there is like, would declaring yourself not to be a believer in the same things mean that you would lose those benefits? That's a question, and maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Because right now would the people still accept membership in that group? Right, membership in that group requires you to deny part of yourself at this point, right? So that is to a degree of self-harm. But also, I feel like, based on our discussion, I don't know you, but it seems like you might be in that category of people who you're choosing to be part of the club without trying to square the capital T truth of the claims.
Right. Well, and I don't teach my children those things, right? Like when I talk to my children, I tell them the truth of what I believe, but then part of me is like, is that selfish of me? Because then I send them to Sunday school, and they're like, my teacher said that was wrong. So I don't know. There's
something to be said for that. The reverse reverse missionary, that's good too. But the
reverse missionary. That's my other question. What is it? Would it not be beneficial were there to be more people in the in-group, but maybe steering the in-group in a more positive direction for society? Like instead of being, let's vote for, person Y because, you're saying the book. I grew up in a community where it's like, no, we have this prophetic word that we're supposed to. Like, that was the way that I grew up. And being like, no, instead of just, believing that God himself told us to do this, let's look at the evidence. But it's a lot easier to steer the ship if you're inside it.
To an extent, I've decided that it's easier to get people off the ship. Like that's my whole deal, right? We'll just maybe don't be on the ship anymore. But again, that's all predicated on if you are explicitly there in your head, not trying to square the metaphysical claims as true, capital T true, right? Conforming to reality. So again, I will give anyone a bit of a pass if they're epistemologically consistent and doing well that way, but still deciding that there are life benefits to being part of the club. So it sounds like that's where you're at. So I wouldn't look down on you that way, because if you're voting for person X over person Y, I feel relatively confident based on this conversation that you've made that choice not because a book said so, but because you weighed the benefits. So, in that case, I have many friends in my life who are Christian, family who are Christian, and again, that's what I'm primarily advocate for is let's work on epistemology. And if the reason why you're making this decision is sound, then the rest of the stuff I can consider to be secondary, tertiary issues. But the other thing I was worried that you might be calling about was my most recent video where Jordan Peterson is advocating for Christianity entirely because it's true, admitting that he doesn't think that there's any metaphysical truth to it, but that again that it's a opiate of the masses situation, and let's harness this to ram through bad ideas, right? So that's a whole separate category. I'm glad you weren't in that category, but when I first saw the call screening thing come up, that was where I worried you were headed. So I think you would agree with me that is a wrongness. That's a level of harm that is kind of Machiavellian, right?
Yeah, correct. And that was actually what I did watch that video, and that did kind of almost make me question myself. Like, and then in me choosing to, pursue this path maybe of useful Christianity, is that selfish of me? Am I participating in something that is in its entirety immoral? Because I believe that is wrong, right? He's using it. He knows he doesn't believe it's true, but he's using it to harm people or to manipulate people. I don't know that he would admit that it's harm, but definitely to control. But perhaps the
sorry, Stephanie, I don't know if you.
Sorry.
I was laughing at something Forrest did on the screen. I'm guessing you can watch it back later. And
I was hoping it would be a sign. I'm hung up on the term reverse missionary, and I've been sitting here imagining how that works.
He's trying to do his Kama Sutra version of what reverse missionary might look like. So anyway,
yeah.
Bless your heart.
Now we've been derailed. But anyway.
But maybe the difference is that it's personal usefulness rather than trying to control or project your your beliefs on other people, right? Rather than trying to use it for control or harm.
Right. So the other thing I would say that's inferior about the strategy of staying and trying to correct the ship from inside is that you will continue to be a number for them. They'll be able to continue to go to government and say, our congregation is of size X and we represent X, Y, and Z. If you are giving money, which is typically a requirement, you are giving money to causes that may well be doing more harm than you would want them to do. Those are all factors that each person needs to weigh in, but they're potentially problematic, right? By even being in the pews, you are giving them some power that maybe they don't deserve. So,
Yeah, I hadn't considered that. That is an important consideration. I tend to give my money to other progressive Christian causes that are not my church, but I don't know. Probably makes me a bad churchgoer.
Yeah, fair enough. Was that enough to chew on? Or did you have any other? Did you want to push back on me on anything else? And did Forrest, other than his insight on the Kama Sutra, want to weigh in?
I just wanted to add to the conversation.
With the reverse missionary. No, I appreciate it. Sorry.
Okay.
I'm being boring and I don't have more.
No, I loved this call. This is
really,
again, you let me talk about things that I'm passionate about and think about a lot, so I appreciate that.
Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Bye.
All right. Take care, Stephanie. Good call. Bye-bye. Shout out to, hold on, let me make sure I get the name right. Shout out to Levi on my Instagram, who said that they were going to call in to expose my dishonesty and how I lie about the Bible all the time. And some others. Oh, and also that the line is a cult and that they were going to prove it. And that they'd be praying for me up until the time that they called in. Nowhere to be found, and lines are closed after that call because we've got 2 calls left, and that was the show. So, cool. Cool. Welcome to the club of all the people who comment on my shit all the time, demanding that I answer them, telling me that I'm wrong about God, telling me that I can't define woman, telling me that that the Bible doesn't say what I say it says, telling me that evolution is easily debunkable. And then they say they'll call, and here we are yet again. Try again next week, though. I'm on every goddamn week. Let's talk to. We're
definitely not a cult. We're not a cult, but go participate in the mug buying because I want to do better this year.
Right? We've got 2 calls left. Both are from atheists. One of them is waiting for 2 hours. We're going to take that call left. They want to talk about Aquinas as God, and the other one is somebody who wants to talk about trans people. So we'll talk to that person as our last call of the night. So stay on the line, both of you. Let's talk first to Taylor. Pronouns they and them, calling in all the way from Pickled Abacus, who wants to talk about Aquinas as God. Very interesting. Taylor, you're on the line with Forrest and Paul. How you doing today?
I'm doing okay. How are you guys?
Very well.
I'm all right.
All right. So basically, I got into a philosophical discussion with someone who was trying to argue for the case of God and simplifying it even to like a sort of deistic sort of God. And they recommended to me to read Aquinas's Shorter Summa. So I did, and I just have some thoughts on the first couple chapters that I've read, and just wanted some skeptics to sort of like act as a sounding board, and also if you were familiar with some of the arguments made in there. I know I've heard Aquinas' name before on the line. I think Matt talks about it sometimes.
Yep.
Yeah, Aquinas, if I remember correctly, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you're good.
Aquinas is just the Kalam cosmological argument in stupider and stupider words for 5 different times. That's literally the whole thing.
Okay, my view is a little more nuanced.
Oh, please be professional. Why don't you?
No, I mean, yeah, it's all I want to say is that I read the 5 Ways when I was 20, and I'm not 20 anymore. So I have read it, but it's been a long time. I'm generally familiar, and Forrest's characterization, while is not wholly inaccurate, but carry on.
There's a little bit. I think one of them. I'm pulling them up right now, and like The last one is the watchmaker argument, kind of, I guess. So like it's a little bit different on that one, but most of them are just that.
Yeah, it's all of them. It's like teleology. There's teleological contingent. There's first mover.
But all of those are just the same thing as Kalam. The first way is motion. Everything is in motion, so there must be a prime mover. That's just there must be a universer if there's a watchmaker and a potter in it. You know what I mean?
Teleological is basically saying it's super important that something caused this. Like, it's not cosmology. It's not. It's the idea that it's super important. Anyway, we should let the caller describe it rather than you and I who don't believe him debating about what his points are. So, Taylor, tell us what you've learned from the first couple chapters and what you'd like us to talk about.
Okay. The first part, I think I have looked up what you're talking about, the 5 ways by Aquinas. I think this is a little bit different. It does start off like in the same thing. Like, it starts off with like trying to prove the existence of God, and then various qualities of them. And the first argument is like the prime mover argument, which I like the first chapter, I already had problems with that. Because like I've heard, like I've been on Dr. Blitz's. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
Yep.
A couple of his lives where like he's talking about how the universe might not necessarily have had a beginning, like it might be eternally into the past. So if there was never a need for the first thing that moved, then that's sort of irrelevant.
Yep.
And then I was also thinking about that even if there was like a first movement or whatever, I don't think I don't know if there would be a better person to have called about this, but I think there's like the quantum vacuum fluctuations where you have like empty space and then like spontaneously particles will form and then immediately annihilate each other. And I was thinking that would also be like you wouldn't necessarily need a prime mover, that you could just have like some sort of quantum craziness going on.
So there's a new book. Came out in summer called Battle of the Big Bang by a cosmologist named Shorty, Dr. Shorty, and also co-written by Phil Halper, who goes by Skydive Phil on YouTube. It evaluates 18 different current cosmological models of the Big Bang. And one of the best parts about the book is that there's a chart in the back that compares the different things. Now, one of the columns in the chart is, does this require a beginning? Does this require something from nothing? 17 of the models, and the one you just described, the quantum vacuum one, is in there. 17 of the models do not require, in fact, explicitly say there was no beginning. Like there's an eternality to it, which is different than infinite, right? And only one model, and that's the theistic model, says that something came from nothing. So this is my new favorite thing, is like, well, here's people who have nothing to do with religion, who have evaluated all the who've done I get in trouble for saying meta-analysis, but they've done an analysis of, all these things, and the Christian claim that we claim that something came from nothing just isn't part of modern cosmology. So again, to me, this retires the first mover thing as a compelling argument. And so, yeah, you can list off the various cosmological models, and I find some of them more interesting than others. They're all above my pay grade because I'm not a cosmologist. But what I do like is the column that tells me no, they don't think something came from nothing. They think that something has been eternal. Something is a brute fact. Just like when you say who created God, they just appeal, well, it's our brute fact. They don't use those phrases, but that's what they mean. So I'm like, well, okay, I have a brute fact of material realm, and you have a brute fact of God. We all agree the material realm exists. Occam's razor, my brute fact is more likely. I don't know. That's kind of where I tend to go these days on first mover. Forrest, do you have a different thought or opinion on first mover?
No, it really just does boil down to, like, you have the problem of infinite regression that you already touched on, that just like, all right, well, what made God and what made that guy and that guy and that guy and so on and so on. And so you inevitably have to invoke special pleading. And really, no matter which way you slice it, be it talking about, the prime mover, or the one thing that nothing else is contingent upon, or that isn't contingent upon anything else. The one thing that is the unaffected, the uncaused cause, the thing that has only effects but no cause, or whatever. Like, it doesn't matter how you slice it. It fundamentally boils down to the same special pleading, where you're saying, okay, so this is an infinite, eternal, undeniable law of the universe, except for this one guy, and it is a guy, and like, that is how it always is. And I think that, yeah, you're right on the money when you're talking about the way that theists will mischaracterize, deliberately, dishonestly mischaracterize the atheist position as necessarily needing to believe that nothing produced everything. Nuh-uh. That's not how it is. Much less satisfying, but much, much easier and much more honest to just say, I don't fucking know where this place came from. And that is so difficult for a lot of theists to accept. And I think it's just because that requires a sort of uncertainty. Whereas theism gives you all the answers, even bad answers, but they are answers. Having this scientific worldview where you're coming at it from saying, all right, if there's something I don't know, I'm just going to say I don't know it. And that doesn't mean I'm happy about not knowing it, but for fuck's sake, I'm not going to pretend to know something I don't. And I'm certainly not going to pretend that I know the dude who did the thing that I don't know, and that dude doesn't want me to have anal. It just, that's a lot of baggage that you just don't get with science. And that's really, really difficult for super creationist-y people to wrap their heads around and be comfortable with.
So I've forgotten your exact question about first. Yeah, does that answer your question about first mover, which I've now forgotten what you specifically asked?
Basically, just like if there were any like other, like what the models were, I guess. Like I definitely wrote down the name of the books you mentioned, and I'm going to check that out.
Yeah, go check it out, because it's a great dispassionate view of 18 different cosmologies, and the other takeaway just from that is, well, people who do this for a living are currently disputing between 18 different, or 17, I forget the exact number, different models, right? So it's kind of like, well, what are Forrest and I supposed to say at that point when people who do this for a living, are that divided? So
that's even, we've had that thing you mentioned. Sorry, go ahead.
At very least, what we should not be dogmatically picking one, right? Like that's just ridiculous.
Yeah, that's I've had Blitz as a guest on this show a couple of times. I've hosted with him, and that is the first time I had him on. We had a caller talking about the Big Bang or whatever like that, and I was like, this is, we don't know what was before this. Is the beginning of the universe as we understand it, and like there's nothing. The universe did in fact have a starting point. And Blitz interrupted me and was like, hey, by the way, there are other models that say the universe could have actually been eternal. And there's other ones that say this other shit, and we're just not quite sure. So, not only is this caller getting everything about this wrong, but also they're not even properly summarizing the consensus or the opinions of different cosmologists. So it's just as usual, science is more interesting than creationists tend to realize. And if there isn't anything here, and it really just is like a complete a toss-up, and we don't know anything about the origins or beginnings or early stages of the universe, okay, that's interesting. That means that we have more questions to ask, Meanwhile, it was a guy. It's not interesting. That all that tells me is that there's some asshole out there that gets to decide this stuff, and he wrote a book about how to own slaves, right? And now I'm very pissed off. You know what I mean? It doesn't help anybody.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I don't know, man.
An argument for a God that is dogmatic about cosmology, to me, is just a non-starter.
Yes.
And that was like forced to go to what you were saying about like what this God wants. That was something that like I right off the jump I had that problem with the prime mover thing, but I was like,
yeah, just
for the heck of it, we'll say I accept that there has to be a prime mover. How do you get to the Christian God from that? And I kept reading. And like later on in the chapter, it's saying like, oh, like God has to be like extremely simple
spaceless
and like perfectly
timeless
good and all this stuff.
The list.
Yep.
And
he
but I thought that
really
was
doesn't
very
want
funny
gay
because it was
people
like
to do stuff.
I thought it was funny how like they're like really hammering on how simple it's supposed to be, when I know like in the next chapter they're gonna like bring up the Trinity, and I'm like, how are they gonna square the circle here?
Yep.
Yeah, if you like reading this stuff, the debate, the internal debate in Christianity on divine simplicity, it's esoteric as hell. But like, if you're into that kind of stuff, like the Christians who want to say that God has parts, and the other Christians that want to say God doesn't have parts, like and the fact that they can't come to any kind of consensus on this, because it's all going to come down to, it's so obvious that the answer is, well, none of those can be true. That's just so. Anyway, it's a fun side read if you feel like it.
Yeah, and that's sort of how we got onto this topic with this person I was having the discussion with, was because like they sort of talked me down into like there is no God, or there is a God that like made the world and then effed off. And I said I would prefer to accept the no God because it seems simpler. Or what's the fancy way of
Occam's
saying
razor?
that?
Occam's razor. It has fewer unnecessary. Forrest is probably laughing at me butchering it. Fewer unnecessary assumptions. I guess that's the
yeah, something like that.
But then they made the argument that God could be simpler than the created universe, which I didn't understand that, but that's what sort of like why he pointed me towards Aquinas, and why I sort of got into that. But yeah, it's interesting, but it's also like high level philosophy stuff, which I guess I'm not used to.
But if they want to appeal to fewer, if they want to appeal to fewer unnecessary assumptions, obviously, right? Like, but again, you and your interlocutor are agreeing that the material realm exists, and so God just has to be one assumption more than the material realm exists. It just has to be. So Occam's razor, like material realm, kind of wins as the best candidate for what was eternal.
Yeah. Well, one of the things they brought up was that it wasn't the God plus the universe, which would be inherently more complicated, I think, than just the universe, but it was like just the God, and that God was somehow simpler than just the universe, but it could like somehow produce the complex universe, which I didn't really buy at the start.
But each one of those is an assumption. Like you're multiplying assumptions. So simplicity doesn't mean fewest parts. In terms of Occam's razor, it's the fewest unwarranted assumptions, or fewest redundant, unneeded assumptions. So anyway.
Okay.
That's any other Aquinas beyond the first one that you had wanted input on?
Not really. That was like the only one that I wasn't exactly sure how to respond to. Like I said, everything else, like once it gets to like the Trinity, it very much seems to be just like arbitrary, and sort of like God has to be simple, but he's required to have these three parts. And just that first part was like I wasn't sure what was the best way to answer that.
It's the same way you'll see.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you'll see the same trend, by the way, in everything we talked about today. You'll see the exact same trend if you look at like most creationist organizations, like Ansys and Genesis and shit. it's the exact same trend. Here is this one simple proposition: we don't accept evolution or whatever like that, or this one evolutionary biologist was a bad guy, or whatever the case may be. And then you can hold your breath for as long as it takes for them to transition from that into, here are the strict rules for women and how they must behave in marriage, and it's all, and they make it out like it's this logical thing, and it is. So you'll see that a lot with these kinds of arguments. Anyway, with that, we've got one call left,
Thanks,
and we're going to
Taylor.
wrap up the show. But I appreciate you, Taylor.
Do I have time for like one more small thing, if possible?
Very small.
So just, I was listening to you last show with Jimmy, and when the Satanist called in, and I am also technically like a non-theistic Satanist, but the reason I go with that is more because of, I think I have some like religious trauma from Christianity, and so it's basically secular humanism with like window dressing. So I think that's I would throw out that that's like a possible reason. Like I don't call myself a Satanist for like anyone else. Like it's more for just for me, because it helps me sort of like, it makes me feel better than
if you want to if you want to laugh in the face of your religious trauma and claim the term Satanism, that's totally fine. I'm pretty sure the caller was saying that like more people should be using the term in order to aggravate Christians into questioning their faith, and I'm like, that's not going to happen. Anyway, we got one call left. I appreciate you calling in.
Thanks, Taylor.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking it. Thank you both. Bye.
Take care. Bye, Taylor. All right. We got one call left, and it's somebody from Chile. Cristobal, pronouns he and him, calling in from Chile, who wants to talk about the standard of evidence for trans people. Cristobal, you're on the line with Forrest and Paul. How are you doing today?
Fine. I'm actually very, very happy. I'm a little starstruck because you're a very huge influence in how I became an atheist, next to Matt, next to Hawkins, next to Hitchen. So I'm very glad you take my call.
Those are some huge names to put us next to, so thank you so much.
Yeah. So I first of all, I want to start with this is a good faith call. Like I really genuinely want to know how you guys like deal with this mismatch for me, because whenever you guys talk with theists, they all bring Kamal, the Pascal Wager, and different arguments when you debunk all of it. Most of the time, they only get like, well, this is my upbringing, this is how I feel, I have some personal experience that I cannot prove to anyone else. And to me, that's not helpful to their case. And I think that in that same category, you can talk to trans people, and they just say, well, I have always felt this way, it's something inside of me. And I think it's the same evidence for both claims, but we discard one as useless and we take the other one as the truth. So what do you think about that?
I've heard this a lot, and it sucks because it is not the same thing at all. Take, for example, like we did in the last call, somebody was asking about trans folks. Like, let's put gender to the side for a second and focus on something else. Let's talk about sexuality, right? Somebody is gay. We know that you were either born gay or not, right? So this person is homosexual. They've been that way their whole lives. They tell you, this is just how I am. I've been this way my whole entire life. I feel this inside. I've never felt anything else. How do you prove it?
By having a gay partner.
Okay. So until someone has gay sex, we cannot say for sure that they are gay.
Probably beyond that, because even if you're very secure of your sexuality, you can still like have doubts. I don't know. Maybe be bi. I don't know.
I'm just okay. Try bi then. Someone says they're bisexual, but they've only ever had a partner of the opposite gender. How do you know they're bisexual? How do they prove that to you?
I think I know where you're going. That it's not that important to me to people to prove their sexuality to me.
That's not what I'm going for at all. I'm saying that you fucking can't. I'm saying that, like,
Okay.
at the end of the day, the best you could do is watch them have gay sex, which is weird. Maybe they're cool with that. I don't know. But, like, even then, that's not to say, I'm not gay, but I'm not saying that I couldn't thumb in a softie if I had to. Like, it's you can't prove anything ever, because that is what's internal to them. That is what's going on in their minds. Now we take, talking about gender here. There actually is, good evidence for this, neurobiological evidence, where we can say we put there's that one really cool study that I like to reference about how we put trans people in a brain scanner, and we showed them a computer generated image of their body morphing either away from or towards their sex assigned at birth. So, like, you had a masculine body that was developed, like, morphing to get more and more masculine or more and more feminine, right? And a cisgender person watching their body move away from, or sorry, a cisgender person watching their body move towards their sex assigned at birth had the same brain regions lighting up as a transgender person watching their body move away from the sex assigned at birth. So we know that this, like, identity and the way that we perceive ourselves is more than just a preference or a religious experience or whatever like that. There actually is something going on in the brain. And another cool example that I like to talk about is phantoms. So we know, like, for example, if someone is an amputee, they may have what's called phantom limb syndrome or phantom pain, where they can still feel that limb that's been amputated, even though it isn't there anymore, because in their brains, that part of their body is still around. And we know that trans people have experienced trans phantoms, where they are having the physical sensation of genitalia, of breasts, of hips, of whatever this thing that is associated with another sex that they were not assigned at birth, that these parts of their body that they have never had, they didn't have them amputated, they've never had them, and yet their brain is convinced that these parts of their body should be there. And so we actually have neurobiological evidence that these folks are telling the truth about what they're experiencing, what they're feeling. But you don't need to put somebody in a brain scanner or whatever like that for them to express this to you. And the same way I could put someone in a brain scanner and show them straight or gay porn and see what parts of their brain light up and then prove their sexuality. Maybe, who knows? I'm not going to do that on the day to day. I'm going to let somebody tell me who they're boning, and then I'm going to ask them why they're telling me that. And then that's going to be the end of the conversation. And so when you're talking about a religion, you are making a truth claim about the nature of existence, about what's going on in the real world, about who made the universe and why, and possibly even how. Like, those are very different claims than saying, this is who I am, this is who I'm attracted to, things like that. And those are much higher, much more expensive claims with a higher standard of evidence. You know what I mean?
Yes, I understand, but I guess that if I don't like explain why I'm asking, I could come out as a bigot, because I currently work in ER, and also we get many patients that suffer like body dysphoria and different things, like panic attacks and stuff. And I try to be as empathic, as compassionate as I can, but for me it's hard with trans patients, because I feel like if they have body dysphoria or gender dysphoria, maybe there's something else we could be doing to help them instead of just going along. Because if you have body dysphoria and you weigh like 40 kilos and you ask for a body reduction, like, you're not going to do that because you're not probably in their life. But in this case, like, you have to go along with it, and that's like tickles the back of my head.
Yeah. So the key here is that, like, I don't know if you stopped talking or if your phone went to sleep, because you're on the web caller. So if your phone went to sleep, I can't hear you anymore.
No, that's all I had to say.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So it's I get where you're coming from here, right? Is that if this person has some sort of a dysmorphia situation and we play into it, that could cause more harm. A couple of things that are really important. Number one is that body dysphoria, or gender dysphoria, I should say, isn't a necessary part of being trans. There are some trans people that never have it. There are some times where people who are not trans have it. There's some times where going through puberty makes it much worse. There are some times where it just goes away on its own. It's a very individualistic thing. What's important about it, though, is that is a mental thing. That is something going on in the mind. And we have folks that study that shit. It's called psychologists and psychiatrists that treat it. And every major psychological association agrees that the treatment for this stuff is transition. Not necessarily full crazy medical surgical transition, all these huge things you hear about on whatever right-wing news station, right? But like social transition, start wearing different clothes, try on a different pronoun, try on a different name, try on just like doing something a little bit different and seeing what that feels like and exploring your identity before you make any decisions. And you'll see even like, the American Medical Association put out a thing a little while ago that I've referenced a million times, written by Jack Resnick, who was the president of the AMA at the time. Talking about, especially with minors, that this is something that requires a staged process with intense supervision that allows folks to explore their identities while keeping their options open for as long as possible. And so when we talk about this stuff, it's important to, like, I get the comparison you're trying to make here. Say if this person is really skinny, but they have some body dysmorphia and they want to get liposuction and like that could be really dangerous. It's just not an accurate comparison, because what we're really talking about here is a very long process full of all sorts of therapists and doctors and all sorts of people that are using evidence-based approaches to actually tackle this issue and help these people come to terms with who they are. And maybe they aren't even trans. That's part of the reason why it's such a long process, is to really suss out what's going on here. And if indeed they are transgender, then we can help them realize, whatever body they want to live in, like that, if that makes any sense.
That actually makes perfect sense. Thank you, both of you.
And then
cool.
I just want to,
really
Forrest already said it, but I just want to say it again, because when I was a Christian, this really helped me understand why that wasn't a good argument. And that is, Forrest said it, but I'll say it again. The God, when people call in and say, well, I have a feeling about God, or I have a feeling about, the thing, they are making they're making a claim about the external world. They're making an externally testable claim that can be identified, that at least can be falsified outside of someone's mind. But when someone tells me that they're trans, even though, because I'm not trans, I can't actually firsthand understand that. But what I can understand is that is a claim about their internal qualia, their internal experience, right? And so they're just different categories. You can agree with them, you can disagree with them, whatever, but they are different categories of claims. So that's just why that's not a good parallel, the initial one that you brought up. So whatever you conclude about that, and this is why I'm bringing it up when I was Christian, I at least learned that, the trans claim isn't something that I can compare direct X to Y kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Totally. Thank you both.
Okay.
Yeah. I appreciate the call, Cristobal. Thanks so much for calling in. Thanks for waiting as long as you did. You were on the hold for like an hour. But yeah, feel free to call back anytime if you have any further questions.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Take care. Bye-bye. We had like all chill callers today. Did we fight with anybody?
My voice didn't raise. Yeah, I don't think. Yeah, you didn't pull your hair out at any point. You didn't have to make any crazy faces.
On Jimmy's show, I had one dude who, like, literally, we were having to argue for like socialism and raising taxes in order to pay for healthcare for everybody and everything. And at one point, he literally was like, "Why are you all so hung up on helping people?" And it's like I was losing it on that call. I was screaming like, "You fucking selfish piece of shit!" So I think I got all of my anger out on that show. And now we had nothing but good calls. Nobody to really fight with. It was just really chill. What a great show. I also do want to say, somebody put in chat here, if I can find, I want to shout out the person, because I know what they said, but here we go. Legally Maud said, if they drive trans healthcare underground, we're not going to do it in a staged process anymore. I think that's a really good point, because if we're talking about like abortion, for example, like when we ban abortion, it does not end abortion. It ends safe abortion, right? Abortion just goes back into back alleys and you get back to potions, poisons, and long-handled spoons. And so, like, that whole thing, it causes a lot more people to die, and it causes abortion to be unsafe and unregulated, and it's very fucking dangerous, and it's life-threatening, but it's still happening all the time. Same thing with transition. If we're talking about, like, if you actually care about trans people, if you actually care about this stuff, you care about people in general, and you think that being trans is blah, 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 wrong and crazy and whatever. Two big things. Number one, if you try to outlaw gender affirming care, you're going to actually four things. Number one, if you try to outlaw gender affirming care, you're going to hurt a lot more cis people than trans people, because cis people utilize gender affirming care way more than trans people do all the fucking time. Second thing, trans healthcare is just going to become an underground endeavor, and more trans people are going to fucking die. So if you care about trans people, that's a stupid thing to do. Number three, if this is a mental disorder and all that stuff, why the fuck are you raking these people over the coals and calling them crazy and calling them diseased and pedophiles and all this other horrible shit? If you really do think this is a mental thing, then you should be a hell of a lot more compassionate than you are by trying to fucking outlaw all the things that actually show that helps them. And that brings me to number four, the people who study and classify and qualify and explain what actual mental issues are. The fucking American Psychological Association putting out the fucking DSM and shit. Those experts in this area agree that this is not a fucking mental disorder or anything like that. And not just psychology, and not just sociology, because for some fucking reason, I know the reason, but recently, psychology and sociology are no longer apparently science anymore. And also maybe even anthropology isn't science anymore, according to all these fucking conservative right-wing crazy people. But like, outside of anthropology and sociology and psychology, biology and biomedical sciences are also on the same page. And so it's just another goddamn conspiracy theory. We talked a little bit about transphobia on this show. If I remember correctly, somebody asked why. That's why. It's conspiracy theory. The exact same way that creationism and flat earth and anti-vax fundamentally boils down to conspiracy theory. This is all new stuff that's being put in the textbooks recently, that you have to be in this club. If you want to be a scientist or a professor, you'll lose your job at the university if you don't agree with this stuff. There's this massive funding from these shadow organizations. Everyone's making money selling this stuff. There's this cabal of scientists around the world that are pushing this narrative that for like 100 years, for longer than it has been possible to have the direct communication, somehow all these people were communicating with each other and working together, and somehow not a single one of them has come out against this. As these new scientists are being trained and going through school, not a single one of them is exposing this massive global conspiracy that somehow all these people are being paid and all that. Every single bit of that is flat earth. Every single bit of that is flat earth rhetoric. And yet, every single word of it is being used against trans people right now to dismiss and discredit the preponderance of evidence of trans people's reality and existence. The fact that transgender people are talked about in literally basic biology textbooks. The exact same talking points against vaccines and the exact same talking points against evolution are being used, because it is fundamentally a motherfucking conspiracy theory, and it is fundamentally science denial, just like everything else. Important things to think about. Don't be a science denier, y'all. Just don't do it. It sucks. Anyway, with that, Paul, do you have any words of wisdom to end the show with?
Go buy my mug.
There you go.
I think it's cool.
Linemerch.com. They're only going to be able for a short time. Get them.
I still haven't gotten my mug in the mail, so I can't tell you to buy it. But you can go do it if you want. I'm not a cop. Hey, thank you so much to Lux for producing tonight. Thank you so much to Paul for hosting tonight. Thank you so much to Stephanie for call screening tonight. Thank you so much to our mods in chat for keeping things civil and safe. Thank you so much to the people in chat, even the ones that sucked. Thank you to our callers, even the ones that sucked. Have an awesome rest of your day and never stop learning. Bye.